Remember the magic of Saturday mornings, disco balls, and handwritten notes passed in class? If those words stir something deep inside you, chances are you grew up in one of the most unforgettable decades of all time, the 1970s. It was a time when the world felt bigger and smaller all at once, when childhood had its own soundtrack, its own scent, and a pace that let you actually stop and savor the small things. And if you were lucky enough to grow up then, you know that every memory carries a little glow that hasn't dimmed even after all these years. Hello and welcome. You're watching Retro Days with David, a place where I share my love for the past and bring back the stories, sounds, and spirit that shaped who we are. If this is your first visit, I'd love for you to subscribe and stick around as we explore the timeless magic of retro America together. Let's take a drive back to the 1970s, not as a history lesson, but as a lived experience. Because back then, childhood wasn't about screens or swipes. It was about Saturday morning rituals, neighborhood games that lasted until the streetlights came on, and school days filled with chalk dust, paper airplanes, and the soft hum of a projector bulb. It was a slower time, a warmer time, and for those of us who were kids then, it was pure magic. I still remember the classroom in the early 70s, the faint squeak of sneakers on polished floors, the dusty green chalkboard, and the smell of freshly printed ditto copies that every kid loved even if we weren't supposed to. Those purple-inked sheets weren't just worksheets. They were little invitations to the day ahead. When the teacher handed you a warm stack of dittos, you knew something exciting was coming. A pop quiz, a coloring project, maybe a group assignment, and if you were lucky, you'd be chosen to operate the overhead projector. The king of classroom technology. That big humming machine could turn any lesson into a show, casting light and knowledge across the chalkboard. And when the teacher let you come up and write on the transparency yourself, you felt like a magician controlling light. Recess was another kind of classroom. Dodgeball was the undisputed king of gym class, chaotic, heart-pounding, and just a little bit dangerous. The rubber balls were heavy and fast, and getting hit square in the face stung like crazy, but we wore those red marks like badges of honor. There were no foam balls or safety nets back then, just pure adrenaline, quick reflexes, and the triumphant cheer when you managed to dodge a throw or land one perfectly on your opponent. It wasn't just a game. It was a childhood rite of passage. And then there were the toys. Oh, the toys. They weren't sleek or digital, but they were ours, and they fueled our imaginations in ways nothing else could. One of the most unforgettable was Stretch Armstrong. Every kid wanted one. That rubbery, muscle-bound action figure that could be pulled, twisted, and stretched to ridiculous lengths before snapping back into shape. Friends would team up to see how far we could stretch him, and sometimes we pushed too far, causing the mysterious goo inside to ooze out. It was messy and a little gross, but we loved it. Stretch Armstrong wasn't just a toy. He was a symbol of the wild creativity and unfiltered fun of the era. At home, comfort looked a little different too. In the 70s, if you had a waterbed, you weren't just sleeping. You were making a statement. Those sloshy, floating mattresses were the ultimate symbol of cool, even if they were notorious for leaks and nearly impossible to move. Paired with shag carpeting and a lava lamp glowing in the corner, they turned any bedroom into a groovy little sanctuary. It was all part of the style, the bold colors, the funky patterns, and the sense that even the furniture had personality. Life in the 70s had a rhythm, and nowhere was that more true than on Saturday mornings. For kids, those mornings were sacred. We'd wake up before the sun was fully up, pour ourselves a bowl of sugary cereal, and plant ourselves in front of the TV for hours of pure animated joy. Shows like Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, The Jetsons, and Super Friends weren't just cartoons. They were weekly adventures that fueled our imaginations and gave us inside jokes to share on the playground. Parents knew better than to interrupt. Saturday mornings were for kids, and the world could wait. If Saturday mornings were the heartbeat of our childhood, then Saturday nights were its soul. And nothing captured that better than the glow of a disco ball spinning slowly in a darkened room. No party in the 1970s was complete without one. Hung from the ceiling, it scattered light across the walls and turned even the most ordinary basement into a miniature dance club. Whether we were grooving to the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack or just watching the reflections twinkle across the room, the disco ball wasn't just decoration. It was a symbol of the decade's spirit, bold, carefree, and impossibly fun. Music was everywhere, and the way we listened to it was just as memorable as the songs themselves. Before playlists and streaming, there were 8-track tapes, clunky plastic cartridges that slid into players with a satisfying click. They weren't perfect. Songs often faded out mid-chorus and picked up on the next track, but they brought music into cars, bedrooms, and backyard barbecues in a way that felt revolutionary. Whether you were rocking out to Fleetwood Mac, Elton John, or ABBA, 8 tracks were the soundtrack to road trips, teenage crushes, and lazy summer afternoons. And if you were lucky enough to own a vinyl record collection, that ritual, flipping through album covers at the record store, gently lowering the needle onto the groove, and hearing that first soft crackle before the music began, became something sacred. Vinyl wasn't just a way to listen. It was an experience. It asked you to slow down, to listen closely, and to treat music like the art it was. Technology was sneaking into our lives in other ways, too. Long before gaming took over the world, there was Pong. Just 2 paddles and a bouncing square on the screen. That's all it was. But to us, it felt like the future. The thrill of controlling that little white dot as it ricocheted back and forth was unlike anything we'd felt before. It turned television from something we watched into something we played with. And once you experienced it, you never looked at a screen the same way again. Even the little things in daily life had their own special charm. Milk, for example, didn't come in plastic jugs. It arrived at your doorstep in heavy glass bottles with foil caps. At school, we drank from small glass bottles too, each one clinking softly as we carried them back to the table. And if you were up early enough, you might hear the rattle of the milkman's truck making its rounds, a sound that was as comforting as a lullaby. Fashion was its own form of self-expression, and the 1970s had no shortage of bold choices. Take earth shoes, for example, those funky, negative-heeled shoes that promised better posture and health. They looked unusual, with the heel sitting lower than the toe, but that didn't stop them from becoming a sensation. And then there were platform shoes, towering, glittering, often outrageous. Just walking in them without toppling over felt like an accomplishment. Paired with bell-bottoms or a jumpsuit, they weren't just footwear. They were a statement. The toys, too, were unlike anything before or since. Big wheels, those low-to-the-ground plastic tricycles with oversized front wheels, were a ticket to freedom. We raced them down sidewalks, driveways, pulling dramatic spins with the handbrake and pretending we were race car drivers. They were loud, clunky, and absolutely perfect. And then there were beanbag chairs, giant, squishy blobs of fabric that swallowed you whole when you sat down. They leaked little styrofoam beads if you weren't careful, but they were the ultimate symbol of comfort. Every living room, every bedroom, every basement hangout had at least one. Some of the most magical memories came from the way we captured time itself. Before smartphones and digital cameras, there was the Polaroid. You'd press the shutter, hear the soft whir of the machine, and then, like magic, a little square photograph would slide out. A minute later, an image would bloom into existence right in your hands. Vacations, birthdays, silly moments with friends, they were all frozen in those glossy little squares, often scribbled on the back with a date or a note. Holding a Polaroid wasn't just holding a photo. It was holding a memory, one you could tuck into a scrapbook, stick to a fridge, or hide in a shoebox under your bed. And of course, no Saturday morning was complete without Scooby-Doo. That talking Great Dane and his gang of mystery solvers were more than just cartoon characters. They were friends. Every episode had the same comforting rhythm, a spooky setting, a string of clues, and the satisfying reveal when the villain was unmasked. We shouted, "Roo-row Raggy!" along with Scooby, begged for Scooby snacks, and dreamed of riding in the Mystery Machine. It wasn't just a show. It was part of our childhood language. Home entertainment looked different, too. Black and white TVs still held their ground in many living rooms, even as color sets became more common. Adjusting the antenna to get a clearer picture was practically a family sport, and watching classic reruns in grayscale had a charm all its own. Meanwhile, the Brady Bunch and Happy Days dominated prime time, shaping the way we saw family, friendship, and growing up. The wholesome humor, the life lessons, even the catchphrases, they became part of our daily lives, woven into conversations and playground games. Some of the best parts of growing up in the 1970s didn't come from television or toys. They came from the small, everyday moments that defined who we were. And few things capture that better than the handwritten notes we passed in class. Before texts, before emails, before emojis, there was the art of folding a piece of paper into a tiny triangle or square and slipping it to a friend without the teacher noticing. Those notes carried everything: secret crushes, inside jokes, weekend plans, and receiving one felt like being handed a piece of treasure. The risk of getting caught only made it more exciting. Reading a note under your desk was like stepping into a private world, one that existed only between you and the person who wrote it. The classroom itself was full of moments that seem small now, but felt monumental then. Film strips, for example, were the pinnacle of educational technology. The teacher would dim the lights, load the projector, and advance through a series of still images with a soft click as a narrator's voice explained the lesson. A familiar beep signaled when it was time to move to the next frame, and even though it might seem primitive today, back then it felt like magic. The room would fall silent, the images glowing on the wall, and for a few minutes we were transported to outer space, to ancient Egypt, to wherever the story wanted to take us. Home was no less full of its own kind of magic. Lava lamps, those mesmerizing glass tubes filled with floating, glowing blobs, were the ultimate symbol of groovy 1970s decor. You could stare at one for hours, watching the wax rise and fall in slow, hypnotic motion, combined with shag carpets, macrame plant hangers, and earthy tones. They created a vibe that was cozy, funky, and unmistakably of its time. And if you had a beanbag chair nestled next to one, you had the perfect setup for reading comics, listening to music, or just daydreaming on a rainy afternoon. Speaking of music, it was everywhere. We didn't just listen to it, we lived it. The ritual of flipping through vinyl records, carefully sliding one out of its sleeve, and lowering the needle onto the spinning turntable was an experience that engaged every sense. The faint crackle before the music started, the bold album art that told its own story, the way we'd read every liner note and lyric, it all made music feel bigger, more important. Whether it was Fleetwood Mac's harmonies, Led Zeppelin's thunder, or ABBA's irresistible pop hooks, those songs weren't just background noise. They were the soundtrack of our growing up, the soundtrack of first dances, long drives, heartbreaks, and triumphs. Family TV time was another tradition we all shared. Shows like the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family brought us together week after week. We laughed at Marsha's "Oh, my nose" moment, sang along to "I Think I Love You," and dreamed of having our own patchwork-painted bus. These shows weren't just entertainment. They reflected who we were and who we wanted to be. They taught us about love, patience, and the beautiful chaos of family life. And who could forget The Muppet Show? Every week, Jim Henson's lovable cast of characters, Kermit, Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, and the rest, brought joy and laughter into our homes. It was silly and clever, musical and heartfelt. The jokes made us laugh, the songs stuck in our heads, and the celebrity guests made the whole thing feel like an event. Even the grumpy hecklers in the balcony became beloved characters in their own right. It was proof that joy didn't have to be complicated. Sometimes all it took was a frog, a pig, and a good punchline. The 1970s were also a golden age for creativity, and toys reflected that. The spirograph was one of the most beloved, a simple kit of plastic gears and colored pens that could turn anyone into an artist. We'd spend hours making intricate geometric patterns, proudly showing them off to parents and friends. And then there were the Rock'em Sock'em robots, two plastic fighters locked in an eternal battle. Landing a perfect punch and watching your opponent's head pop up was one of the most satisfying feelings in the world. It was simple, silly fun, and we loved every minute of it. Even fashion had its playful side. Tube tops, those strapless, stretchy shirts, were everywhere in the summer, paired with high-waisted shorts or bell-bottoms. They were bold and a little daring, a symbol of the carefree confidence that defined the decade. And for those who loved to stand out even more, there were platform shoes. Glittery, colorful, and often towering, they were as much a fashion statement as a challenge to balance. Some memories are tied to the senses, smells, textures, tiny details that take you right back. Like the scent of petroleum jelly, which many kids used as makeshift lip gloss before fancy cosmetics came along. Or the satisfying click of a flip clock's numbers changing on your bedside table. Or the soft clink of glass milk bottles being delivered at dawn. These small details may seem insignificant, but together they form the fabric of a childhood, one where the pace of life was slower, the world felt safer, and every day held a little surprise. Looking back now, I realize those years weren't just about the things we had. They were about who we were. Every toy, every TV show, every Saturday morning ritual was a piece of a larger story, one that shaped the way we see the world today. We didn't have smartphones or streaming services. We didn't scroll endlessly or chase digital notifications. Instead, our lives were built around simple pleasures, the anticipation of a new vinyl record, the joy of a handwritten note, the magic of a Polaroid picture slowly revealing itself in our hands. Even the smallest details hold a special place in my heart. The hum of a classroom projector, the glow of a lava lamp in a quiet bedroom, the way a beanbag chair seemed to swallow you whole as you listened to Fleetwood Mac or Elton John. These weren't just passing moments, they were the building blocks of who we became. And when I think about it, the reason these memories still shine so brightly isn't just nostalgia. It's because they remind us of a time when being present was all that mattered. We were explorers in our own backyards. Our bikes were our tickets to freedom. Our imaginations turned sidewalks into racetracks and front lawns into baseball fields. And even though the world felt big and full of possibilities, it was also small enough that neighbors knew each other, families ate dinner together, and kids played outside until the streetlights came on. There was a certain warmth to that world, a feeling of connection that's harder to find now, but still lives inside all of us who grew up back then. Some memories are bigger than life, like the thrill of seeing your first concert and feeling the bass shake the ground beneath your feet, or the simple joy of waiting by the radio for your favorite song to come on, finger poised over the record button so you could capture it on a cassette, or the unforgettable moment when your parents handed you a camera and you realized you could freeze time with a single click. Those weren't just moments, they were milestones. And perhaps what I love most about remembering the 1970s is how it reminds us that happiness doesn't come from what's new. It comes from what's shared. We shared Saturday mornings with Scooby-Doo. We shared laughter with the Muppets. We shared stories over family dinners and secrets in handwritten notes. Every memory was a thread in a larger tapestry, one woven from friendship, curiosity, and love. So here we are, decades later, still smiling at the thought of disco balls spinning over a crowded dance floor or the satisfying pop of a rock'em sock'em robot's head. Still remembering how it felt to drop the needle on a brand new record, or to see your reflection in the glossy finish of a freshly developed Polaroid. The world has changed in ways we could never have imagined back then, but those memories remain timeless and unshakable. And that's why I love sharing these stories with you, because they're not just my stories, they're ours. They belong to anyone who's ever ridden a big wheel down a steep driveway or raced home for cartoons or waited impatiently for a new episode of the Brady Bunch. They're reminders that, no matter how much time passes, the heart of that era still beats in all of us. Thank you for spending this time with me and stepping back into that unforgettable world. If this journey brought a smile to your face or stirred up memories you'd almost forgotten, I'd love for you to stick around. There's so much more to explore together. Make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next trip back through time. And in the comments, tell me, which memory from the 1970s will you never forget?